Selectmen's meeting, March 21. Oh,
Look okay?
That was really close, did you see how close she got?
What's nice about that woman's going?
Oh, I know, it looks so nice, and then you go out, it's like 35.
It looks horrible, these film.
So you like this guy? He's got a decent haircut on him.
No, it's one more week of it and then it's gone. Hopefully I can go back to work.
All set? All ready to order? Phil, will you read the pledge of allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Approve the minutes of March 4th, March 7th, and March 15th. Accept the motion.
We did get a motion, but I'll probably abstain from the 4th and 7th.
Okay. Any second?
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
First two for you.
First two abstentions and then March 15th. Aye.
Right, right.
Manifest approval, $492,391.90, 7 cents dated March 10th, 2022, and $20,573 dated 3/17/22.
Motion to approve with an explanation.
Please.
That's a large number, and I think Eleanor is ready to tell us why. Or do you want me to? Or do you want me to?
You have the numbers.
Okay, so we had school payment in there of $115,000. We had Primex insurance for $187,000. That was the liability insurance. Then we had the workman's comp for $99,000, and we had New Hampshire retirement, all in the same pay period. So now the Primex and the school is not a one-time payment,
No,
but
it's
we always,
monthly.
we pay them in big chunks. And the Primex, the liability and the workman's comp, those are a one-time payment a year, and it covers us for the whole year. So between the New Hampshire retirement and the Primex, that pretty much accounts for the whole 400, almost 500,000.
Motion is made and seconded. No further discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Facility usage. Jennifer Smith. Town Hall, April 30th for baby shower. Motion,
Motion to approve?
Second.
discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
We have 5:30, we got Steve, building inspector. 3-4 items here. You're up, my friend.
Which one do you want to start with?
Indoor air quality, town
Indoor air-
buildings.
Okay, so this came about a while back. I believe it was the selectmen wanted me to look at putting more air purification in the building through ionizers and whatnot, based on what we already have here, which basically is the system that goes in the ductwork. And what it really does is it takes all the small particles, it energizes them and makes them all stick together to make a bigger particle. That's all fine and dandy, but you need to have the whole system to make that work. And the packet that I believe you all have, it was really a PowerPoint presentation. I don't know if you want me to go through page by page, or if you just want me to give you the lowdown, but
Low down, would be good. Yeah.
Buildings work.
We'll run it, we've had it, yeah.
So buildings work as a whole system. It's from the outside to the inside, and the environment on the inside, and the environment on the outside. If those aren't working in harmony, you don't have a healthy environment. So no matter what you put in the building, it's not gonna work. So the building really needs to be looked at for air movement, through leakage in windows, doors, which we do have some of. Another thing that you need to look at is the environment from outside that's getting in. Part of that is the sun, with the amount of windows that we have on this side of the building. Yeah, it's great in the winter. Your overhangs aren't nearly big enough to help you in the summer. So as you heat this building up, your mechanical system has to work harder, your air movement has to work better, because you're gonna increase the humidity. With heat comes humidity. Air movement dries that out, so there's a big environment that's happening. In order to get all of that air environment to work, you need the HVAC system to be sized enough with the proper filtration system to help with the mechanical air movement if you don't have a building that has people running through it every single day, 24/7. You need that mechanical system to pick it up, but you also need a filter on that mechanical system that is tight enough, which is your MERV rating, how tight the fabric is, as to what size particle that's gonna pick up. Right now, I can tell you, and I didn't bring them in, I forgot them, the air filters that we're currently using in our buildings are MERV 1 to 3, which basically lets everything except for a softball go through it. So you're really not gonna do anything by adding an ionizer to the duct system that you currently have. You'd be better off recirculating and looking at the building and try to figure out where the improvements can happen. And potentially looking at your HVAC system to see if it needs to be upsized or if it can be modified in such a way to create the environment that you're looking for. So
And
that's.
who would do that study, Steve?
There are building scientists. There's one company I know that's out of Concord, but there's several of them around the state that will come in and do an environmental study of the building. It's not looking for hazards, it's looking at the building itself and how it's put together and what the components are. There's a few different companies around the state that can do that.
And they give us a recommendation for,
They'll come through, they'll do basically what they're gonna call as a building study. They're gonna look at all the components that I just laid out in this PowerPoint. And they'll give you a report as to, what they believe your problems are and how they can be resolved.
And how much roughly, do you have any idea?
Honestly, I don't know. That was a direction that I was looking for tonight. If that's where you wanna go, I'll go that route, or if you just wanna go with the ionizers, I'll do that as well.
I'd rather not do a Band-Aid treatment, I'd rather, if we're gonna do it, put money.
I think if we're gonna fix it, we should fix it right.
Right,
But I think we need to look at all of our buildings.
yes.
I don't know how much we wanna sink into the fire station, although, that's people-wise, we've got people in there 24 hours a day, so.
Correct.
But the same thing with the police department in this building. Now, I was told the school is already doing something like
The
this.
school
for
has
the
done
school
it and the
system.
library has done it. But
They have-
again, I give them the same speech that I'm giving to you. All they did was a feel-good measure, or like you just said, a Band-Aid.
Okay.
Probably predates me, but mentioned a fix and a problem. Is there a problem with the air quality in the buildings, or?
No, we talked about, we had federal money and our thought was to use the federal money to, increase the air quality in all of our town buildings.
And the money's earmarked for structure improvements or health and safety?
It really wasn't earmarked for anything. Well, there were federal guidelines on what you could spend it on.
Yeah.
And improvements like that fit into the federal guidelines.
And is it a cost share or is it a grant?
It was a one-time payment from the feds to us.
Gotcha. Did we receive that already?
Yeah.
Half of it, yeah, we get the other half this year.
Or is that just in the general fund?
Right.
Okay, thanks.
That was the nutshell, if you have any questions. That was the nutshell, if you have any questions.
I'd like to have the environmental building scientists come in and tell us what they think. I mean, do we need a better HVAC system? I mean, I think first thing I'd like to know from them is, they're gonna do their study, but then bottom line is, what does a system like that cost?
Right, they'll give you the whole breakdown.
Yeah.
How much was the money that we received? 50%?
42,000. So we'll get a total of.
Can you check with them, Steve, and see how much the evaluation would be, or would they charge for an evaluation, or will they?
Yeah, I can check to see if they'll charge for an evaluation, sure.
I think that's our first step.
Yeah.
Okay.
Check if they charge for an evaluation, then come back to us and
We'll waive that.
Yeah.
Is it available?
Yeah, to get more information on that.
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay, thank you. Solar.
So this one came up as my own little brainchild when I was going through and doing the building budgets and realizing how much money we really set aside for electricity for all of the town buildings. Having worked in other municipalities, not one that has gone this route specifically, but I will tell you, I've introduced this to all of the municipalities that I've been in. And I know people that work in other municipalities that do it, but there is a solar package out there. I gave you a little synopsis of it in your package again. You basically hook up with a solar company. They purchase all of the equipment. All they're looking for is a $1 rental agreement from you for a building or a piece of land to put the solar panels on. For 5 years, you will get a reduced rate on your electrical coming off of those solar panels. And then after that, you have an option of continuing at that rate or buying the panels outright at a reduced rate because they'll be used at that point. But you could reap the benefit of 100% utility cost of your electricity coming off of those solar panels for a mere $1 at the beginning for the first 5 years. That 5-year period where you get a reduced rate is so that the investors into the solar grid that you're putting on your property, they get the government kickbacks with the incentives, but there can't be any exchange of money for the first 5 years. So they do that by taking money from the grid that they put on your buildings or your property, and they sell that elsewhere to receive their money for paying for the panels. And then they also, at the end of the 5 years, they'll get their kickback from the government for doing solar. And that's why the option is yours in 5 years, to outright buy the panels or leave it the way it is, because they've already gotten their money back from it.
We talk about just at the present time, just putting it on a certain building, or we talking about fields? Or
Potentially all, or if there's a piece of land that you're willing to talk about or negotiate to put these panels on, they'd love to hear that. I did bring a group around from Revision Energy. They're one of the bigger solar companies in the state of New Hampshire. They do a lot of this right now with some of the bigger cities. They can either do it on buildings or they can do a piece of land. They don't really care. The piece of land is dependent on how close a phase 3 power line is to that property. There's a couple of potentials here in town that could be used. One probably harder to get than the other, but all worth looking at. But right now, the town is close to $50,000 in electrical rates for all its 10 buildings. So, annual.
A proposal together and show it to us?
They're currently working on one right now. They just didn't have it in time for this meeting, but they are putting one together to show us what that cost savings would be over the first few years.
Where's the possible?
So the field up and back of the landfill would be one option. They weren't overly thrilled with the slope on that site. And the other one is, and I don't even know if this is possible, I didn't check into it, but just on the other side of Arboretum, where all the testing wells are, there's that big paved area. If that's contaminated, that might be a perfect spot to work with PDA on putting a larger panel system up and both reaping the benefits from it.
Do they bring the 3-phase power to the site?
It'll be part of the cost of putting the solar panels up, so that may be something that we have to incur to get the panels up. But both those locations are within a striking distance for 3-phase.
And see what they propose and see what they pick and come back with some cost factors.
I will hopefully have that in the next week or so. I was hoping to have it for tonight, but.
It's okay if you don't see it, I wouldn't assume you do, but you know like what the residual value is left on it after 60 months, after 5 years?
The solar panels now are almost 150 years out for replacement.
No, the value of them at 5 years is approximately, be a percentage of what they are new?
I was told that it would be pennies on the dollar to buy them back. Again, that's gonna be part of this package that they're giving to me. So
Potentially 99 pennies?
maybe, I don't know, but even $1 per panel is better than what they cost new, so.
Yeah, I've checked into the solar panels, they degrade at about 5% per year for the first like 10 years, and then it gradually slopes off to less than that, but it's about 5% per year.
Thank you. Steve, the reins to run with it?
Yep.
Good. Legislative.
So legislative is in here, probably not so much for the selectmen as it was more for the planning board, and I've already given them this presentation. But one of the joys of what I do for the state of New Hampshire with the New Hampshire building officials is I sit on their legislative body. So I do a lot of debating with the state legislators and senators in Concord on bills that are going to affect my work and planning board and how towns are gonna be looked at in the future. And right now, there's a pretty good push for statewide zoning. It's becoming more and more increasingly apparent over the last 5 years in Concord, and this year was probably one of the bigger battles that we had with land use LSRs or wannabe bills that came through. So I gave you just a tidbit of what we were dealing with. I don't know what order you have them in, so I don't know if you wanna go through all of them.
Just the housing change. Correct.
Do you know what the bill was on that?
I read your.
The number?
Oh, yes, I read. Senate Bill 400.
House Bill 1014?
400, the third one.
Senate Bill 400, oh yes, this lovely masterpiece. You had to pick the Senate Bill first, didn't you?
Pick it up, Brandon.
So
Start the deep end.
the Senate is a very fun group here in New Hampshire because they have pretty much caveat to do whatever they want, whenever they want, and however they want. So this is an interesting little bill. When it first came out, it was nothing more than mandatory free training for planning board members and zoning board members. A lot of what Concord gets is that, a lot of the beef from contractors is that zoning doesn't work. It hampers them, planning doesn't work, it hampers them, it makes projects too hard to build. So this bill is proposing that the Office of Professional Development is going to put together a free education series for planning board and zoning board members that the state is trying to make mandatory that all members take. This is their way of getting through an unfunded mandate by saying that OPD is going to create the program, give the program for free through Zoom or through a webinar. All you need to do is have your people spend the time to watch it. But the other thing that this bill did that nobody really saw coming until it hit the floor is if you go to the second to last page, it's the easiest way to spell it out for you under the methodology, they are actually creating an incentive program for municipalities to give tax incentives or any other incentives that they can think of to encourage workforce housing to come into your community. So this is nothing more than another workforce housing bill, which we have seen a ton of this year. Most of which have been tabled in legislative, but there are still a couple that are running through and will probably be tabled in the next round. There's just not enough information out there, and there's too many people kicking back at what they do and how they're gonna be controlled. With House Bill 400, or Senate Bill 400 actually passed by a very small number, and most likely, based on what the House has done on bills like this, is going to get tabled or ITL'd before it goes to the governor's desk. So it's really not a bill that I'm overly concerned about. It's probably gonna get pushed through as more of an unfunded mandate than anything else. It is still alive. We're going through what's called crossover right now. All of the Senate bills have been bled to death in the Senate on their side and all the House bills on their side, and now they're going to a crossover. So Senate will look at all the House bills and House will look at all the Senate bills, and we go through these all again for another 2 months.
Right.
And then what makes it through goes to the governor's desk and we fight with him.
Looks like we're gonna have a couple fights up there.
We've had a few.
About the heat in the buildings.
I'm just gonna, when you were done, Steve, I wanted to talk about, some of our town buildings.
I am done when you're done. I don't know if there's any more of these bills that you wanna go. A lot of the bills are trying to get affordable housing and workforce housing in your communities. One of the bills is really nasty and it actually got tabled, you'll be happy to know.
Yay.
Workforce housing to be allowed in any zone. Doesn't matter if it's industrial, commercial, residential, single family, they were gonna allow it to go anywhere. That got tabled. Now, keep in mind, at the end of the legislative session, which is about 3 months from now, any bill that gets tabled has a chance of coming back to life if one of the two floors can get 2/3 majority. So there is still a chance that any bill that's tabled can come back this year and end up in front of the governor. Based on the way it came out of the House floor, it's probably not even gonna come close to having a 2/3 majority. So again, it's one of those bills that we're not worried about until next year when it can come back.
We're just hitting traction.
It's a pause button. We would have loved to have seen an ITL,
Right,
because that is dead, and the only way that can come back is with 100% brand new language, which is very rare. So an ITL would have been better, but we did get a table, so it's a win for us.
Last one was on the, it's like it got tabled, same situation. House Bill 1033, which was the one about using tax funding for state lotteries.
Yes, so this was an ugly one, and it still is an ugly one. I would not put it past the Senate to bring this one back to life without a 2/3 majority. Again, this is where I said the Senate can do whatever, whenever, however. This bill had a lot of traction. It actually came out of committee where they ought to pass. And with the help of local legislators and town administrators, we were able to get it really debated on the House floor. Almost to the point where there were some fistfights going on. And it was tabled by like 4 votes. So there is a good chance that this one could come back to life with the House in a 2/3 majority. We're probably gonna come back to life on its own in the Senate, because again, they'll just write a bill and stick it in here and don't worry about crossover. But this was basically a bill that was gonna stop people like myself, your town administrator, NHMA, who you are a member of for a lot of your legal advice. It was gonna prevent them from testifying on these bills in front of legislation, because we're paid by taxpayer dollars. I'll be honest, one of the things that got this introduced and got this thrown out at the House and argued is that yours truly went up to him at a public hearing and said, you realize that your stipends and your gas mileage are paid from taxpayer dollars too, so I guess we can't have a Concord. And a lot of their eyes lit up. Cause it's true, they get the same money that we get, so how can they do it and we can't? So that started a whole new debate as to exactly how fair this was. So again, it got tabled. I would not be surprised to see it come back, but we've tabled it for the past 5 years, so hopefully our street can keep going and we'll just keep tabling it.
very good. Thank you, Steve.
Can I add a caveat to that? And there's one, it wasn't this particular bill, it was the one where they can put housing in any zone. What they weren't aware of was the uniqueness of Newington and Portsmouth, and that we are on the water, the only deep water port we have in the state. It didn't even dawn on them that they could be basically crowding out the waterfront. They could be crowding out the waterfront and putting housing there and kill any future developments for a deep water port. I'm talking about the industrial side of it. And the Rockingham Planning Commission, I was working with them last week, and when they were reading the bill, it says, that's not what it says, and then finally, what they were doing was just reading the explanation of the bill. The explanation's not accurate. It doesn't say what the bill actually says. So those are the kinds of things that are going on up there. They're not really, like that one for training. That's a completely different bill. So that's part of the problem. And there's a lot of flashing mirrors and, you know, the smoky mirrors, and people that are not really seeing what the whole story is. That's what's happening up there, as Steve said. He's the one that brought up the whole issue of what's going on up there, and it's scary. So, whatever it's worth.
Thank you. Okay,
Steve, the one thing I would like you to do is look at the old town hall, look at like our big auditorium. With the cost of fuel oil skyrocketing, do we need to heat that building constantly, or can we only heat it when it's gonna be used? Same thing with the big auditorium, the Kent auditorium. If nobody's using it all day long, let's not heat it. If we can turn the heat down.
I think now, knowing that we're probably not gonna get any sub-zero nights, I think yeah, absolutely we can turn the heat down.
Yeah.
Just bear in mind, if you turn heat down, it doesn't necessarily save you money because it takes that much longer to bring everything up to temperature. So there is a happy median when it comes to energy cost, and turning down and turning back up is not really viable.
Well, let's find the happy medium then. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yep.
all right, we'll move on to old business. Shattuck Way, flooding.
So,
Bob did a great job, he walked that whole thing, raining in the mud and snow, and got his feet wet.
Eric kept us high and dry. So, we walked it with our town engineer, Eric Weiner. Dennis Hebert, the chairman of the planning board, walked it with us. Eric did a great job of explaining what the problem with that is. When the state engineers looked at the box culvert underneath Shattuck, that's a 5 foot by 5 foot culvert. So they did their drainage computations based on a 5 foot by 5 foot. What they failed to take into account is that the standing water daily covers up half that culvert. So it's not a 5 foot by 5 foot, it's a 2.5 foot by 5 foot for surge capacity. But they did the computations based on a 5 by 5. So we're gonna reapproach DOT and let them know that they did make a miscalculation, and that's what's causing the flooding down there. Little bit of an eye opener, the water runs from all the way up from where Stoneface is proposing, meanders down through in front of and underneath the driveway for the old Asia restaurant, cuts underneath the railroad tracks right behind the Saban residence. Then it goes completely around and around Custom Pools. Custom Pools is surrounded on 3 sides by water and 1 side by the road. So they literally are on their own little island down there, and that's what
That's the
floods.
problem.
Yeah, because as the water level goes up in that stream that goes out and around, water being water, says the easiest way across is straight across the lot, so
Right.
it does. So, but the faster that stream drains, the better. We are gonna need to have, the folks that own Asia, they need to do some maintenance on their portion of the ditch. Eric's not sure if we wanna make them do that maintenance now, before we fix the culvert, or how much water can that thing handle, so. But we are gonna contact DOT and let them know that, the box culvert there was miscalculated flow-wise, so we want a better computation. It's not downstream, so once you go through there, you go through the cat nine tails down in behind Sprague.
Right.
There's a huge, how big is that, Dennis? 4 foot culvert pipe?
Yeah, it's about 40 inch anyways. It's 40 inch.
But that thing had maybe 3 inches of water in the bottom of it, so, and it had plenty of capacity down, but it's definitely the Shattuck Way box culvert, so.
Okay, so we'll wait to hear from the state and sit down and have a meeting with them.
Yep.
Great. Next is, Wilcox Way. Now, who drafted this agreement? Was it our attorney?
John Rangan.
Yep, okay, good. Thank you.
You have the original, Martha?
Yes.
Martha, would you explain for those out in TV land and the viewing audience we have present?
In a nutshell, when Wilcox Way and the company did the construction on that site, unfortunately, part of the retaining wall landed in the town's right of way. So to correct this problem, or to give us some language in our quiver, we have a license agreement before us. Mr. Tietzel has signed it, and the board just needs to vote on it and sign it. It lists a hold harmless.
How much of the retaining wall landed on town property? Just an ooch? Not a real misstep, just a ooch?
Well, we have the planning board chairman here with us.
How much of the retaining wall landed on town
About
property?
2 feet.
Okay, thank you.
Not much, yeah.
What'd you say, Dennis? I'm sorry.
It was just a couple of feet.
Okay, okay, it was just,
But we just wanted to make sure that if anybody hits that wall and damages that wall, we're not fixing it,
Right.
they're fixing it.
And I
And
just
that's
wanted
basically what this agreement
to make
says.
sure it wasn't like a 60-foot run.
No.
Okay, thank you.
I'd recommend we approve, and we're signing that.
Right. Seconded? Seconded, Brendan? The discussion.
Am I supposed to second it, or?
Yeah.
I thought you did.
No,
Are
no.
you waiting for discussion?
Yeah, I seconded
I
our
was hung up
discussion.
I was hung up on number 4, but I think I know, I'm probably reading it incorrectly. In the event that the licensor, or I believe it's town of Newington, in the course of its normal right-of-way maintenance operations damages the retaining wall, licensor shall not be, okay, that is what we're saying.
Yeah.
Just needed to read it out loud, thanks.
All those in favor?
Did you ever second it, Fran?
Ted did.
Who seconded it? Who seconded it?
I did, sure,
You did.
I second that.
It's in the bag. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Firefighters contract and ratification.
As the board knows, town meeting approved the IAFF funds for the contract. The board has in their packet the proposed new contract. The legal size sheet has the pay scale with the 1% COLA in it that will be attached to it.
We need a motion to,
I'd recommend we approve the contract as written, although there were a couple of changes in there, correct, chief? We have to make note of the fact that I think your administrative assistant.
Correct, I don't know where that pay scale came from.
Easily
So-
done, yeah, we've got the
Yeah, you
new
got it,
pay
she already
scale.
has the.
So we've got the new one?
Right.
Okay, so it is the corrected one? Good.
we need a motion to ratify this.
Would be great.
Then I'd make the motion that we ratify it with the corrections that were made, as changed, and I believe the fire engineers, all three, recommended approval of this?
Yes.
We did.
Yes.
And,
At our meeting.
okay, and the changes you're discussing are
The administrative.
the administrative assistant, okay.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, we did
Yeah.
vote for it.
Yeah, I wanna make sure that, we don't ratify the wrong rate for her.
We,
She
yeah,
gets
we
the
approved the
proper-
one that EJ. No, the amount that went to the budget committee and before the town was the correct with her,
Right.
the correct line in it.
That's the one that we approved at our own.
And that is the correct one attached today.
Yes.
It is
Okay,
now,
thank
yeah.
you.
Second,
Second,
Oh, you second.
discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Review Point subdivision release. Notice of reconstruction of lot transfer. This has been ongoing for several years.
Yes, years ago, the board signed a notice of restriction on lot transfer that is now to be released. That's Fabian Point.
I'll entertain a motion to approve it.
I recommend we approve.
Second.
Second, discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
New business, ground scare, RFP.
The board has one bid that they've received. We advertised in Portsmouth Herald, NHMA, our website. Portsmouth Herald has an online advertising that was done.
And you reached out to people too.
Yes,
Say that again, Martha, you reached out to different contractors?
right. Specifically Fabian Point Grounds Care, who's completed the work in the past. They're not doing as much, so they declined to bid.
Okay. You have another one. These are the, gotcha.
Do we have to vote on this tonight, or do we have time to read it?
Plenty of time.
I'd like time to read it.
Seaman line, or you don't know what the numbers are. Before, season price before April 1 is 14.9. Season price 3 in April of 23 is 15,645. In April of 24, we'll go to 15,640, same, so it's 3 years within.
23, 24, the same.
Yeah, what did we shoot at last year, do you recall that?
I don't know.
Okay, no, that's fine.
Same,
We're gonna-
same contractor though, I believe, right?
Yeah,
Right.
same
Yes,
contractor, yes.
So I think we just sit on it till, we'll table it till the next meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else coming up? Mr. Weiner?
One question, does that contract have a performance guarantee for each of the years that if they trigger certain things of quality that are not above a certain line, the contract becomes
We haven't read,
optional?
we just
I don't know,
received-
that's why I want time to
That's why
read
we
it.
wanna read it. instead
That's the
of-
one thing I think we need to make sure that all our contracts have going forward is always performance guarantees.
Thank you for your input. Anything else? Motion adjourns or not?
Do you have anything, Brandon?
Quick question, what, is that under town buildings? That contract under town buildings?
Land management.
Land management? Okay, thanks. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second, discussion, all those in favor?
I think the planning board would like us to adjourn early so that they can start getting set up.
You stay right there.
I was gonna
See
say,
the
I'm
wall.
keeping this chair.